Ladies and gentlemen, second installment from the first unit here. We're starting on the middle of the second page. I want to get through a number of topics here, so I'm going to get right after it. We're going to talk about printing, then we're going to talk about Renaissance art, and then the new monarchs, and then exploration. And away we go. Impact that the printing press had on Renaissance thought and life. It makes it a lot easier for you to get a hold of texts and to get a hold of any academic work that's going to be passed around. Certainly this doesn't lead to, say, a lot of popular reading among the middle classes and the lower classes especially, but it does mean it's a lot easier for ideas to circulate throughout Europe, and we're going to see the beginning of more, say, middle class and secular reading taking place. Barnes and Noble's not on the corner in our little village yet, but it's on its way. Some of the trademarks of Southern Italian Renaissance painting. Now, it's important that we don't get these confused with the hallmarks or the main ideas of the Renaissance, the humanism, the classicism, the secularism. What I'm asking for here are kind of, what do I see when I look at the painting? And here's some examples. Well, depth and perspective. We don't see that in Middle Ages art. You don't see dimension. Foreground and a background. You certainly don't see so much of an emphasis on the human details, on making each individual a specific person. Southern Renaissance art also loved that moment in time. There's so many of the paintings that are that one moment when Jesus tells the disciples in the Last Supper, "One of you will betray me," and then the action is boom, it's that moment right there. What does everybody's face tell you? Or the moment that Jesus is reborn, that's the moment. Okay, we also see statue work in the round. We hadn't seen that in a long, long time since the classical period. And speaking of the classical period, kind of a blending of the classical ideals and the Christian ideals. So we're going to have some mythology in there, some Greek and Roman references. We're going to have some Christian ones, and you take it all together, and there you have it. If you're looking for more depth and detail, you can head to the PowerPoint that's on Synergy that I used in class. That will give you all of the information you're looking for there. How's the Northern Renaissance different? Now, the Northern Renaissance takes place after the Southern Renaissance, and takes place a large part once the Protestant Reformation has begun, and that really has its seat in the northern areas, in the German states, in the Netherlands, in England. What that means is that the art is going to reflect that Protestant culture. We're going to see a more reserved tone. We're not going to see a lot of religious imagery in the painting, but we are going to see pious individuals. On top of that, a real keen eye for the specific. Northern Renaissance art loves the detail and the incredible layering of things. In a way, it's kind of the continuation of the skill. If the Southern Renaissance artist is going to show you, so that's what a bicep looks like, or that's what a calf muscle on a leg looks like. The person in the north is like, well, yeah, I can do that, but let me show you something else. Let me show you how many items I can paint on that shelf and make them look perfect from this distance. Let me show you the tapestry and how much of a detail I can weave into there with my painting. You're also going to see the common folk, which we don't see a great deal in Southern Renaissance art. They become part of the landscape of Northern Renaissance art as well. Okay. Moving to the next main topic here, the tactics used by new monarchs to consolidate their power. When we began our study, we talked about monarchs who were generally speaking very weak. They were, at best, the first among equals within the noble group within their country. The new monarchs are a generation of leaders who are going to try and distance themselves from the other nobles in an attempt to stamp their claim to complete control over the society. So the new monarchs are going to do a variety of things to do that. For instance, you're going to want to tax more. The more you tax, the greater the amount of revenue you get. You're going to use those tax revenues to build a standing army, an army that really marches on your orders, unlike previous leaders who would be at the beck and call of the nobles and whether or not they wanted to fight. These are leaders who have the ability to call the soldiers into action whenever they need them to be in action. Now, as a part of that, you're going to need to take your nobility and push them away from you. You're going to take them off of your royal councils. You're going to remove them from any positions of power, and then you're going to take middle-class individuals whose aspirations are really monetary, not political, like the nobles would be, and you're going to build that middle class into a success story. You're going to boost them up. Of course, the more business that takes place, the happier the middle class is. The more business that takes place, the more tax revenues you get. So it's really a win-win situation for you. At the same time, you're going to control deadly force. You're going to end the practice of nobles having armies, and you're going to marry the right people and administer justice as well. So all of these things can be used as tactics. Some examples: Louis XI from France, who increased taxation in a variety of areas in order to build up his army, was very smart about who he married off his relatives to. He waited for noble families to die out, and then he kind of cockroached their land. Well played, sir. Okay. Henry VII in England used the court of the Star Chamber, which was a room of justice where he would belittle the nobles and kind of give them the sense that we, the Tudors, are the important ones. Now, Henry VII takes over England after a prolonged period of war called the War of the Roses, and he establishes himself as a man of peace and of prosperity and of calm. And if those things take place, then you can build business and you can build the monarchy, and your realm is going to be much more stable. Probably the best example is Ferdinand and Isabella, who are going to assure that there are no nobles on their councils. They're going to use their own armed bands, their hermandades, in order to take over. And then something that perhaps we don't see as much in the other two countries, religion becomes an organizing principle for Ferdinand and Isabella. In 1492, they're going to kick out of Spanish society some of the individuals they see as being minorities, the Muslim minority and also the Jews. The goal here is to try and consolidate and galvanize the entire country around Roman Catholicism. The idea being, if we're all Roman Catholic, then we all believe in the same thing, and I can speak to you in the same language. Now, that's going to come back to bite the Spanish later on, because frankly, once they get all of the wealth of the New World, they're not going to have the money-managing, sort of smart economic types. Those were roles that traditionally had been filled by those religious minorities, and they're going to squander that wealth. So sometimes you make those decisions and it comes back to you. Name motives for European exploration of the Far East and the New World. Traditionally speaking, the main motives are gold, God, and glory, and those could fit in there pretty nicely. On top of that, there is something of the new monarchs here. If you're a new monarch, if you're Ferdinand and Isabella as a great example, and you see the possibility of new wealth abroad, you have to take advantage of that. You have to sponsor voyages that go abroad and try and bring back the wealth of that. And nobody's going to make more wealth off of it than the Spanish. The French are going to do well too, and eventually the English will in the later stages. But you can't be left behind. There's a national pride issue here. It really boils down to, do you have colonies abroad? Do you have markets, resources? Are you really pushing yourself out there? So those realms that are the Spanish, the French, the English, the Dutch to a certain extent later on, those are the ones who are going to prosper in this early period. Now, we don't see the Italian states involved, and as a result of that, the Italian states and kind of that Mediterranean area is going to dwindle in importance. The real powerful countries of Europe are going to be ones with access to the North Atlantic, the English, the French, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese for a very short period of time as well. New technology that made exploration and colonization possible. You have to talk about guns and gunpowder and cannons. That's certainly important when you're dealing with the native populations. But a couple of things that really made it all the more doable. Much better maps, which are partially created by sextants. A sextant is a device that allows you to measure star patterns using the horizon and make more reliable star maps, and then also more reliable cartography maps of the actual ocean surfaces and of the land. A country with a good set of maps, like the Portuguese early on, the Dutch later on, those are people who have the real access to the wealth. There's also a thing called a caravel. A caravel, C-A-R-A-V-E-L, is a ship that is a combination of a very maneuverable small ship that has triangular sails and a much larger rectangular sailed ship. Therefore, it has kind of the durability we need for ocean-going voyages, which European vessels had lacked until the 14th century. But it also has that maneuverability that allowed them to get around the Mediterranean Sea. Both of those things are enormous in assuring that we can get people across the oceans. Flipping the page. We're going to hit kind of a who's who, and I want to give each of them maybe 15, 20 seconds here. Prince Henry the Navigator was a Portuguese gentleman who opened a school for navigators and is instrumental in the exploration of the coast of West Africa. De Gama is a Portuguese explorer who finds his way eventually all the way around Africa to India and then back. And that allows Portugal the access to the trading routes that make them so wealthy. Columbus, if you don't know Columbus, stop the video. Okay, Vespucci is an Italian explorer and cartographer who names, or I beg your pardon, America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. Magellan in 1521, Magellan decides, let's see if we go the other way around the world, how long it takes us. And so he sails out from the European continent, around South America, into the Pacific, all the way to the Philippines, where he actually dies. And then he comes home in a barrel, all the way around through the Indian Ocean, around Africa, and back to the Atlantic. What does it prove? That's too far to go. You should go the other way around Africa. If you really want to get to Asia, you shouldn't go around. They didn't understand how big the Pacific was. That was the big thing that no one got. And suddenly Magellan found himself stranded in the Pacific, and the men started having to eat the ropes and the rats and the sails, and there were mutinies, and oh yeah, things got spicy. Cortez is a Spanish conquistador who conquers the Aztecs, mostly using smallpox and fear, but also using weapons and the hatred among some of the rival tribes within Mexico. What goods were exchanged as part of the Columbian Exchange? To the New World came livestock and some produce, some grains and things, but the most impactful item in the long run is disease. European diseases decimated the population of the Americas. Some archaeologists and anthropologists would say that in the 100 years after Columbus's arrival in 1492, 90% of the individuals who lived anywhere in the Americas, 90% of them died as a result of disease. It decimated the population and opened the area, if you will, for European settlement. What goods went to Europe? A few things that are very important. Number one, very stable, staple base crops. Maize, potatoes. Goods that you can take to Europe that have a higher caloric content per acre than anything the Europeans had in the past, and that were more drought and sort of bug resistance, if you like it. Those are crops that are going to grow, generally speaking, every year. Now, yeah, there's a potato famine. I understand. Okay, but otherwise, they're very reliable and they're idiot-proof, which is great for a peasant population, which Europe has a lot of. So in other words, those goods are going to go to Europe. The Europeans are going to eat them. The population is going to get larger. Because the population is so large, they're going to be like, where should we go? Oh, the Americas, where everyone else has died, and away we go. It's going to feed over that way. The second thing that the Europeans get are a lot of cash crops that they really take a liking to. Tobacco, rice, eventually cotton, indigo, things like chocolate. Sugar is a huge cash crop. All of those are going to make the Europeans more and more interested in getting involved. The commercial revolution is kind of the result of this uptick in trade, that as a result of the Columbian Exchange, there's more goods and more money flowing around, and that increases the overall amount of wealth within the society. That's the end of our second video, folks. The next one we'll pick up with the problems in the Catholic Church and the role of Martin Luther. Have a good night.